this is one of the most important panels. I'm going to ask that we remove the podium so that we then arrange accordingly. The topic for this panel is diversity, equity and inclusion, moving beyond performance to genius transformation. And we are going to welcome our panelists. The first one to come is Bosile Kladi from Frontline Africa Advisory. Bosile Kladi, as you're coming up, we will give a round of applause. And then joining Bosile as well is Luthando Ekadi from Umba Creative Agency. And we then have Abasei Kumonala from Reporting and Research Manager at the FSTC. Let's give a round of applause. And finally joining us is Dr. Hanri Kriel, who's from the National Council for Persons with Disability. Let's give Dr. Hanri a wonderful round of applause. And I am going to be moderating the session. We start with the time. So, like I did with my previous panels, right? I'm going to give you 2 minutes to give your own reflections on the topic in particular. Of course, the likelihood is that there are some questions that you are going to answer up front, but if you can, try to stick to 2 minutes so that we then create a moment to then have questions. Luthando, I will start with you to kick us off with your own reflections. Just push it up. Yes.
Wow. Sure, reflections. So for me, I'm going to start with a practical example of what happened today, right? We're talking diversity, we're talking inclusion, and we're being intentional. When we have to be intentional about diversity and inclusion, it has to be more than paper or policies. It has to be physical, it has to be practical. What happened here today, it is an example of what happens when we are not prepared or when we are not intentional and we are doing things on paper. I've been a speaker and everybody knew I was coming. Been here yesterday, you all saw me. The hotel knew. But the matter of fact is, we should not have a ramp or we should not comply because Luthando is coming. We should comply because it is the right thing to do. Whether there is a person who's going to use a ramp or not, there should always be a ramp, right? Because I'm not always going to put on paper that I am a wheelchair user. I'm a great speaker, that's what is important.
Yes, it's on.
That was actually great. That was fantastic. I'm just gonna look at from a personal view.
Yeah.
When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we look into the room right now, I'm gonna take a quick picture and upload it on our organization and say #human-centered transformation. We look diverse, we look like it's inclusive, everything looks perfect. But if we had to go into the cracks of it and ask ourselves, yes, diversity speaks to who is in the room, but equity, is it fair? Are people being included? When it comes to the inclusion, are there decisions or voices being heard? Like for example, Luthando. Knowing that we're having a discussion on diversity and equity and inclusion, it goes beyond how the picture perfect may look. It goes into deeper within the organizations as well. And that's why it's very important that we don't only focus on a tool of reporting towards compliance, but we focus on what the actual goal is. And that is to get people involved, to ensure their voices are heard, to ensure their voices are respected, to ensure that they are valued and treated equally. Thank you.
Yes, Doug.
Thank you. Hello everyone. My name is Hanri, and as you can hear, I am deaf, but that doesn't stop me from speaking here today. And I want to add what both of these ladies said. We are talking about AI. Everyone says AI, but if you know content, we need to have subtitles, we need to have actions. Again, you know, the conference, we have accessibility. Is your organization accessible in terms of captions and subtitles? It doesn't stop with, you know, one language. We are South Africa. We have 12 languages, you know, different languages that need different subtitles and actions. It's something small, but always think about making your media accessible. Good.
Thank you. You can keep that one. Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. I don't know how I'm going to follow what the ladies just said, but just to piggyback on what they've said. So I'm in the space of policy, and when Lutando you said it can't just be all about policy, it needs to be about real life implementation, that is very true. Because we talk a lot, but when it comes to action, it's a completely different story. And I think one of the things that Dr. just said, which is also very important, we heard a lot about AI and how the negative parts of it, but then you touched on something so beautiful. I was at a conference last year and someone was speaking on how AI has helped so many people. This man who spoke, he was blind, and he had an app that you could upload a picture and it tells you, it explains the picture to you, and it gives you an idea of what is going on in that picture. And I think one of the things that I realize is as we speak on these topics of DEI and other topics, we need to understand that in as much as some of us have the privilege to say, I can type, I can read, I can do all of those things. Other people cannot. So the same tool, AI, that some might see as wrong and maybe we need to scale back on it. For somebody else, it's like, this is what I need, this is the exact tool I need, so that I can become a postgraduate, so that I can make something of myself. So I think as we speak on these topics, we need to understand that we must understand some of us speak from a point of privilege, and we need to take a step back and see things from other people's eyes as well.
Sure. So listen, I will, follow up on that, and I imagine as someone who works on policy, one of the big things, or at least one of the greater things that you see in your space is, or at least maybe let's talk about the common refrain in South Africa. People like saying, our government has good policies, but they lack on implementation, right? And I can imagine, even when we talk about diversity, equity and inclusion, it may actually look that way. But how do we get to, and you're talking to people who run agencies here, who are owners of agencies, and some of them are, relatively high up in their roles, right? And they hire. How do we ensure that it is not a tick box exercise? So we're not just, so if we're to consider DEI, it's not just for optics and compliance.
So I would say as a leader, it starts with you. You need to set the tone for your organization. Yes, we can put it in our policies, but there are many people that work for organizations, they cannot even tell you what the vision or mission of the organization is. And this is something that you find when you go on websites. Some of the first things that you say when you say about us, vision, mission. But many of us work in organizations where if they were to ask you what's the vision and mission of your organization, you'd never be able to tell them because you don't know that, because they don't tell you these things. And as a leader, I think it's very imperative for you to take what you tell and not just trickle it down and say, okay, my managers will handle it, but be an active part and an active participant in the dissemination of information. We have this thing in my organization where we have a cultural audit, and this audit is meant to go and speak to employees and say, what are the issues that you see? What are some of the things that you notice within the organization? Maybe it's in the way people are hired or the way they are treated, even in coming to how people are disciplined within the organization, to kind of give management an overview to say, look, this is what your employees are saying. They're saying management is not doing this, they're not doing that. You guys are not treating us in a certain type of way. And I think those things are very important for you as a leader to be insightful on what is happening in your organization. Don't always expect your managers to come to you and tell you, because if I have to save my job, I will sell you a lie, anything, just so that I can keep my job and you can be happy, because I know what you want to hear. So it's important for you also to engage with your employees if you can. Not even if you can, because you can. You have that opportunity and the ability to do that. To go to your employees and say, look, how are things going? Your interns, whoever that comes into your organization, build that culture, create an environment where people are able to talk to you. Because if your only interaction with your employees is through a middleman, which is a manager, I can lie to you, I can sell you lies, and you will believe me. And then you will wonder, why are staff leaving my company? Why are the reviews online bad? But it's because you're not even taking the initiative to say, okay, this is not just about policy. Let me actually go in and see what is the cultural organization in my organization, what is happening there, and then you can make the changes from there.
Sure. Lutando, your opening input and provocation really got us to thinking about how representation may actually be tokenized, right? But, and I guess the question is, as we're talking about the human factor, or at least focusing on the human factor, what are some of the ways that we should be as a communications industry that talks about, the reputation, or at least help clients on reputations? How do we also, not only for ourselves, but because we work with clients that you can see that they are not doing representation well? How do we advance this mission of ensuring that representation is not tokenized, but it's a real thing?
Good question. I'm quite controversial at times. Every business worries about the bottom line.
Yeah.
And the greatest lie that's been sold and it's been believed is that being inclusive is expensive, right? But is it? I've yet to come across those numbers. I've done my research and I can't find anything that supports that. So for me, is when business is intentional and you want to hire persons with disabilities, for instance, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to start small. And then build on what you have. So for example, instead of saying that I'm going to hire persons with disabilities, how about say I'm going to change the culture of my business to make it more inclusive so that we can liaise with customers that have disabilities? How about we say that we're going to make our businesses more accessible, physical accessibility, so that when we have clients that have disabilities, they can enjoy our facilities same as everybody else. Then, when you want to hire people with disabilities, your environment then works for you. So it's being, and I think what we're taking for granted is this. When I like money, I love money. So I'm gonna take it there. We're missing out a lot. When we're looking at travel statistics, a lot of persons with disabilities do not travel to Africa in general. Africa is seen as the fit of the fittest. And that is not so true. And I want to talk about our country, for example, South Africa. Our hotels, they actually do compete, we just don't have enough hotel rooms. We do have facilities that cater for persons with disabilities, but persons with disabilities themselves within our country do not know about those. So we are missing out on the market. We could not hold the Olympics. Why? Because our country could not. Because to host the Olympics, you have to have the facilities to host the Paralympics. So we are missing out on money. So I invite you, fellow managers, fellow owners, fellow founders, we think differently when it comes to accessibility, when it comes to equity, when it comes to inclusion, because there's money there that we're sleeping on. There's money we are sleeping on. So maybe if we just shift our frame of thought, and we move away, because there's two models. There's the medical model. The medical model looks at a person with a disability or a person that's different as something to be fixed, right? From it, that's a charity model. So when you're looking at me and you're doing business with me, you come to me because it's charity, not because I'm good at what I do. I'm a wonderful public relations consultant, specialist. But when you're dealing with me, if you're going to come through from a charity model, you're going to miss out on the talent that I have. But if you come to me from a partnership model and you say, how can I work with you to make sure that our project get maximum visibility, get maximum exposure? How do we move forward? Now it's a different conversation. So I just think that we need to think differently from the way that we've been. All of us, persons with disabilities and persons without disabilities, of course.
Sure. Yes, let's give a my question really segues from what Lutando was saying, right? And she frames it as there's a need for a frame shift, right? And the question to you then is, how do we frame shift from policy compliance to culture change? Because that is what she's asking for, right? You work with a transformation organization in the financial services sector, you know, and I imagine that this transformation is not just a buzzword in your conversations, right? However, there's a thing that needs to be done from a culture point of view. What does that look like? What does that shift look like?
That kind of shift needs to start from a point of view like how it's understood. We need to be able to think differently. I wanted to take it back because I can introduce myself where I'm coming from. So I'm coming from a BEE kind of space, right? We need to ask ourselves, we have the policy perspective, which is the BEE, and other legislations that are trying to support inclusion in a societal level.
Yeah.
That's one level. That's one part. And then we have the organizations who are the ones who are implementing these provisions within the Act or the different sector charter council, which is per their codes. We need to bridge that gap. We will move not from just reporting on compliance, on the status, on the data, on the numbers, on the fact that we have upskilled persons with disability, for example. But it needs to be more of, okay, how are we tracking on their progress? How is it actually advancing society? How is it ensuring that the work that the organizations, together with the government and the legislations, are actually resulting in genuine transformation, that the intended beneficiaries can actually feel and have those lived experiences? But over and above that is the awareness for me. Because though we might have certain acts and legislations, ask yourself, in this room, how many of us are actually aware of the kind of provisions that are trying to benefit us? How of us are aware that we have elements that speak to skills development, to management control, to upskilling from junior to middle to executive? How many are aware of this? How many are aware of that we have elements or pillars that can speak to supporting small, medium businesses? Especially, this is from the marginalized section. How many of you are aware of that? And that's where the disjunction is that we have such regulations and the intended beneficiaries, even within their own organizations, might not even be aware that XYZ is driving transformation. So we need to have those discussions with them, bridge those gaps to ensure that it's not just a stance of we're reporting on the status quo of transformation. It needs to be the social impact and the lived experiences, but not only that, but it needs to be sustainable. It needs to be purposeful, because it shouldn't just be like a tick box or a number. It should be their lived experience so they can go and tell the story to others.
Sure. And I think it's one thing to look at the one specific category. So for instance, if you're looking at people living with disabilities, right? You brought in the dimension of now the economic inclusion, which if you're looking at the numbers in South Africa, 80% plus or more people are African, Black African, and you then have the divisions. But if you were to just do a snap survey in this room, the representation from economic benefit point of view is skewed, right? A lot of white major agencies continue to receive the bigger briefs from bigger companies and the like. And that's why I'm asking, from a PRISA point of view, how does, because from a numbers point of view, the scorecards tell us we have the MEC sector charter that talks to how we're going to follow through on inclusion. There are conversations that are had at various levels. But what I was taking from what Lutando was saying was that there's the policy, which is a good thing because now it's in place. But there's a need to move to a culture shift. And I'm trying to get there to say, how does this culture shift? Because I'm worried that if somebody at a bigger corporate has a brief, but only considers a white-owned agency, not because the black agency is not good enough, but because they don't see the importance of representation, inclusion, and diversity. How do we navigate that cultural shift?
We need to be intentional.
Okay.
And it honestly starts with the leaders. You have to have leaders who are intentional with the kind of representation they're trying to achieve. Because at the end of the day, like we said, the BE Act itself, it's voluntary in nature. So already it's not an act that says this must be this mandatory. It's up to the leaders to truly embrace the dynamics within South Africa, with our different cultures, different races and beliefs, and be intentional to ensure that representation is there. So it comes down to what is happening in the boardroom discussion. It must not just stay there. We can have as many events, we can have summits, we can have awards, etc. But once we leave the space, are we leaving with intentionality, or we're leaving with, oh my gosh, I got a nice goodie bag, it was great, yes, we were done. Be intentional with what you're trying to achieve. Spread the word and spread the awareness. Thank you.
And I hope we get to a point where we quantify this being intentional. Dr. Hanri, what in your view would you say are some of the silent assumptions that continue to exclude people living with disabilities from communication design, from narrative spaces and leadership pipelines, particularly, it does not necessarily have to be only within our space, but what are some of those assumptions that are really holding us back? And because people like us who are able-bodied, we don't see those assumptions, or at least they are silent, right? And how do we deal with those silent assumptions?
Okay. I think I must just add something what you said. We have policies that are really, we have the white paper, with the rights of persons with disabilities, but it has to start with government. They have to implement it. If government starts with, yes, we are going to do it, like, for example, the UK or the USA, they have all these rules and guidelines, Europe is accessible, but why don't we be accessible? To answer your question, South Africa, we have 64 million people living in South Africa, and 70% warriors has persons with disabilities.
You said 17?
70.
Okay.
17. Yeah. So what are we going to do to help these people in terms of, like you said, the narrative? For me, I can take me for an example. You see someone with a disability, you say, oh, shame. You see someone in a wheelchair, oh, shame. You see benefits like that. Why is she sitting at the back? She has someone with a disability, mobility change. Why don't you go past that person? And even though each of us, we have the ability to do what you do, maybe we can't walk, maybe we can't talk, maybe we can't see, but they'll ask that person, and it all depends on the person with the lived experience. It's always, I can do what you can do. I will make it my own way, how I can do it. I hope that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. And I think one of the things that you are challenging us in this room is to say, we need to ask, because you are the person with the lived experience. But do you not think that sometimes the barrier to us asking is we don't know how to be sensitive to asking you? And perhaps what we're also asking you is to say, what are some of the ways that we are then sensitively asking you so that we then get the right answers? So that we don't shy away because we're afraid to offend the people who are living with disabilities in how we ask. I think about, when you think about the queer community, it's the same, right? From time to time, how we engage with people from the queer community is almost out of, I don't know how to approach this thing. And therefore, you keep quiet, you make your own silent assumptions, and then boom, we then have a big issue. How do we approach it in a sensitive way? Asking, yes.
Don't ask. Don't be shy. I always tell people look at me like, I'm stupid, or I don't know anything. They don't know how to PhD. I work hard to get where I am. Don't ask the person. The person will tell you, listen, I didn't like the way you asked the question, but let me tell you my story. You don't know my story. So the person will tell you, listen, you were offensive. That's my opinion. Maybe you tell me another answer, but that's what I would say. Don't ask the person. Whether you think, oh, shame, don't ask. That's all I would say, don't ask. They will tell you. Now, I don't want to answer your question, but look there, or whatever.
Thanks, Doc. Lutani, you want to follow up?
Yeah, simple. Guys, it's not that deep. It really is not that deep. For me, we are all human. Let's engage on a human level, right? So, if you wouldn't want it done to you, don't do it to me. Don't ask me questions that you wouldn't want me asking you. So, don't ask me how I, that question that you don't want to ask, you want to be asked. But at the same time, there are simple questions that you can ask. First of all, hi, how are you? First place to start. Then, so ma'am, I see you are on a wheelchair. Yes, I am on a wheelchair. What happened? Do you want to talk about it? If I say yes, we can have a chat about it, or I'm in a hurry. I'm not being rude. I'm in the environment, it's just not. Do you understand? Sometimes there is this, let's read the room sometimes. There is imposing, there is just asking. And this is not even has to do with disability. It's just Ubuntu, guys, So it really is not that deep. Engage with a person on a human level. So it doesn't matter what it is. Could be even a queer person. If I'm curious, Yes, I am gonna look at you. The best example I like giving, it's children. Children are the freest spirits. There is no agenda, there is nothing, there's just curiosity. It's okay to be curious. Something is different, I am different. I am quite aware that when I step in a room, there is something different. Could be the way that I look. Could be the wheelchair. Could be with your papa, could be something. But I am quite aware that sometimes I'm different. Sometimes I'm the only woman in the room. Sometimes I'm the only person with a disability in the room. Sometimes I'm the only African in the room. Sometimes I'm the only South African in the room. So there's levels of differences. So if you're going to step in a room and you're the only woman, men are going to look at you like, what are you doing here? Now you are a point of interest, and it's okay. But when people start imposing and asking silly questions, and we know as women, where we just felt like, no, this man back papela now. What's wrong with these guys? And so it's the same. So let's, with every issue, I like looking at it like that. Don't separate it, just be human. We all engage on a human level. That's it.
Thank you so much, Alexander. We have 6 minutes I'm going to take not more than 3 questions. And please be direct with your questions. Let's not start a thesis. So that they can then, as they wrap up, each one of them, because they are closing. I saw a hand there, I saw Alisa there, and Ibrahim asked many questions. I'm going to skip him. So you also asked a question. That lady did not ask a question, so you're going to get an opportunity. We are only taking the first time, the people who are speaking for the first time. You spoke, Ibrahim spoke, so that's why you are excluded in this inclusion conversation. Please go ahead and ask the question.
Hi, my name is Kajaha and I'm a master's student at the University of Johannesburg. I wanted to ask about, you mentioned something along the lines of big briefs being given to white-owned agencies. In the process of getting a scope of work, there is a part where agencies have to all put in their submissions and stuff like that. And the reality is that in those agencies, as much as they are white-owned, there is black people that are working behind. You'll find that there are black strategists, black copywriters, black creatives basically, but the company is owned by a white-owned person or white-owned people. Do we then say that it is an exclusion and inclusion thing, or is it a thing of the people who are involved in the briefing and everything they're just not good enough to get, or they're just not as best as the ones that win the bigger campaigns?
I choose to answer that question outside because I'm just the moderator. We're asking the panelists. I have a very good answer for that question. Let's take Palesa for the name. And I'm not evading, by the way. Yeah, I have a solid answer for that.
Thank you very much. My question is, in what ways can we get our country up to par with our European counterparts in terms of making spaces accessible? And what conversations are happening within the department of, there is a department that's dedicated to, there's a department, yeah, there is. So what conversations are happening there in terms of shifting some of these conversations that we're having? Because there is a minister who is, and with a whole department who is supposed to be spearheading and moving us from an awareness perspective as South Africans.
Sure. We'll then take that last question before you. So how you're going to answer, you will respond to some of the question and then you make your closing remark. Yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Mataka and I come from Ifika. My question is in terms of the culture shift. I know that leadership buy-in is very extremely important, but not all leaders will understand or buy into, the culture shift, especially, for example, if we are employing maybe leaders to come and lead a company in Africa and they come from Europe. How can we influence those leaders? Because in them having the conversations among themselves, they may not understand the importance and nothing will happen. Yes, it can be in the policies, it can be a conversation amongst normal employees, but how do we then influence that culture shift amongst those leaders?
Yeah, thank you so much. Bosele, I'm going to ask you to start wrapping up. So you start us with one. If there's a question you want to respond to, you respond to quickly, and then you make your closing remark.
Can
You
I
have
just
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Yes.
No. So that question on how do we influence leaders that come from different countries. So I'm not going to lie to you. That is a very difficult one because it's something that we have dealt with before, where we have to now take someone who comes from a completely different place and now have to make them understand the dynamics of South Africa, the dynamics of our
politics, the dynamics of our government. And to be honest with you, that's a very difficult thing to do. I don't even want to lie to you and say there's some magic wand that we can just tap and then it happens. If there was, we'd use it. But it's a very hard thing to do. But I think at the end of the day, it's just about being persistent. Because you know more than anything the impact of that if certain changes are not made. You know the real life impact of that. So it honestly just is based on you being persistent on pushing this narrative and trying to make this other person, the leader, understand that, look, this is the things that we have to do, these are the kind of shifts that we have to make. But in short, I think one of the things that I have even learned in this moment. And I think another, just to remind myself again is to know that as we speak and as we shape policy, even as we discuss certain issues, let us also remember our privileges that we might have, and let us also remember to just take a step back and look at things from a holistic perspective and not just from a me point of view, what looks good for me, what suits me, and all of that. Even as Black people, sometimes we need to take a step back and say, okay, it's not just us. There are many other people we need to consider as well. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause. Dr. Hanri, you're responding to the same group of questions, but also make your closing remark.
Okay, the first question about infrastructure. We as a National Council of Persons with Disabilities, will alumnus know and people out there from the government, and everything, contact us. We have a section for universal design and access. We will with you at place that go inside. There's no emergency exit are not right. The platform was not right. There's no ramp, there's no elevator, or whatever it is would be. There is someone. We stand up for that. So if you know there's a building, for example, built, contact us and we will help. Even with trains, public transport, everything. There is a section for everything. My closing, I would just say AI can make everything faster, but not necessarily too well. I will leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hanri. Yeah.
I'm going to try and come to both in a way, but mainly bring it to a point of within our own country, we need to remove the aspect of operating in silos. And I say this even within the government structures. They will have different departments, but they need to be a platform where they come together and actually recognize and how they interject to assist in different aspects within South Africa. The same also applies to how we can convince external parties about how it is important within South Africa to be representative. We speak about Ubuntu, but how far are we practicing this every day? It comes down from leadership. And this is how it is. It's from a leadership perspective that we need to practice the Ubuntu across within the departments, but also on the ground, where we ensure that the voices are being heard and the stories, are being heard about the African people and how it is important that we work together. It shouldn't be a point where change is seen as, oh my gosh, this is going to cause such havoc. We have AI, technology is taking over. Change is going to be messy because people are so comfortable with where they are right now. But just because it's messy doesn't mean it's not going to be glorious at the end. We just need to take that step now and ensure that we are able to influence those Europeans and also able to ensure within our structures we're able to connect so that we are actually intentional at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just as you opened, you may close with a provocative.
Sure. I'm looking at the room and I see the young ones. But I hope you can jump onto this train. Do you guys remember New Horizons? Yes. Right. Back in the day, post-apartheid, there was generations. Yeah. And some of us, when we watched Queen Morocco, we saw a bit of us on television. And we wanted to be like them. And as communicators, advertising agency, directors, and a lot of us creatives were validated by New Horizons. The reason I'm saying that, if we're not radical and we're not intentional about representation matter. There is a white paper on persons with disabilities. It's a tick box exercise. It's done. There's nothing government can do anymore. Government has done what needs to be done. It is up to us as South Africans to stand up, be intentional, and do what needs to be done. Policies are made, policies are written. It is the people in the room, it is the people in the offices that have got to make that policy a living document. So for me, it's happy new horizons. Let's see where we go with being inclusive in South Africa.
And Dr. Hanri Kriel there. Let's give them another round of applause.